In this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe and leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great new day to all my self-care friends and family. Welcome back to another Room to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so thankful that you have made space to be here with us today. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I need you to do me a quick favor. If you're feeling the vibe, go ahead and show us some love. Tap the screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need you to share this out with someone who could use a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you haven't done so already, go ahead, hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel so that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also want to personally invite you to check out our digital home at theselfcareclub.org, where you will find everything you need from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help nourish your growth and remind you that you are supported every step of the way. Just know that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today, I encourage you to give yourself permission to pause, to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly, for you. And remember, if anything in today's episode hits home, be sure to drop those green hearts in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Welcome in, Cheyenne. I see you, beautiful. Hey, girl, hey. Papa Smurf in the building. What's up, brother? All right, guys, let's jump straight into this. Today, we're talking about something real. It's not going to be like a surface level, kind of the episode full of cute quotes for social media or things like that, right? Today I'm talking about the stuff that quietly runs people's lives without them even realizing it. Today we're going to talk about borrowed beliefs. Can you guys put borrowed beliefs in the chat? Hey Monique, hey Stephanie, welcome in. I want you guys to put borrowed beliefs in the chat. And when I'm talking about borrowed beliefs, I am talking about the stories, the rules, the expectations, the invisible scripts that we've been following for years that were never actually ours to begin with. Beliefs about who we are supposed to be, beliefs about what we deserve, beliefs about love, beliefs about money, beliefs about success, beliefs about rest, beliefs about how much pain we're supposed to tolerate before we say enough. Right, borrowed beliefs. And a lot of this didn't come from, like, it didn't consciously, I'm sorry, a lot of us didn't consciously choose beliefs. Okay? We didn't choose for this to happen. Right? We didn't pick this. They were handed to us. They were passed down over the years through family conversations and childhood experiences. Hey Nicole, welcome in. Church teachings, relationships, heartbreak, trauma, the culture, right? Survival. And so some of those beliefs weren't just spoken out loud. Some of them were demonstrated, right? Maybe nobody said you have to overwork yourself to be worthy, but you watched everybody around you do it. Maybe nobody said your feelings don't matter, but every time you spoke up, you were told that you were being dramatic or sensitive. Hey, Coach, Elevated Awakenings. Maybe nobody said you're responsible for fixing everyone, but you grew up being the one that everybody leaned on. So those patterns turned into beliefs, and those beliefs turned into life rules. Now here you are years later, trying to heal, trying to grow, trying to step into the life that God has placed you in. But the blueprint that you've been operating from is not helping, right? It was written by people who were navigating their own fears and wounds and limitations. Some of y'all are trying to build a whole new life while carrying mental furniture that someone else moved into your house years ago. Maybe it's a couch of guilt, a table of fear, a bookshelf full of expectations, a closet filled with shame. And, you've been walking around that furniture for so long that it just feels normal. You forgot the house was supposed to belong to you. You forgot that you are allowed to rearrange things. You forgot that you're allowed to throw some things out completely. But here's the truth. Just because something has been in your life for a long time doesn't mean that it belongs there. Some beliefs were meant to be questioned. Some beliefs were meant to be outgrown. Some beliefs were only supposed to exist long enough to help you survive a season, not to define the rest of your life. And if we're being honest today, some of the mental weight that people are carrying right now has nothing to do with their current life. It's just old programming, old expectations, old voices, old fear, old survival stories that are still trying to run the show. So today, we're slowing down long enough to examine some of those beliefs. This is not to shame ourselves. This is not to blame our families. And it's not to disrespect where we came from. But it's time for us to wake up, to recognize what belongs to us and what never did. Because I think that healing sometimes starts with a very simple but powerful question that we have yet to ask ourselves. And that question is simply, who told me that this was true? Who told me that this was true? And see, once you start asking that question honestly, you might be surprised at how many beliefs in your life suddenly start looking a little suspect, a little questionable. So today we're opening the windows, right? We're gonna start letting some light in our room, and we're doing a little mental and emotional spring cleaning today. Because again, the life that you're trying to build deserves space. So let's talk about it. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the question that I just put out there. Who told you this was true? So again, we're going to start the conversation, by simply asking ourselves, who told you that? And I'm not joking. It's not meant to be rhetorical. I want you to really think about it. Who told you that you're too old to change careers? Who told you that relationships are supposed to be hard all the time? Who told you that you have to stay loyal to people who keep hurting you? Who told you that being a good person meant sacrificing your peace? Who told you that you're not the type of person who could be successful? Who told you that you're too much? Or on the flip side, who told you that you're not enough? Because see, a lot of people are walking around living their entire lives according to beliefs that they never actually examined. Somebody said it. A parent, a teacher, a pastor, a partner, a coach, a friend, a boss, society, social media, right? And because it was said during a moment when you maybe were young or vulnerable or just trying to understand the world, it stuck to you. It settled in your mind like furniture that nobody has ever questioned. And see, the thing about this belief is, once something becomes a belief, it stops feeling like something you were told and it starts feeling like something you know. And that's the dangerous part, because beliefs don't announce themselves as beliefs, right? They disguise themselves as facts. You don't say, I believe love requires suffering. You say relationships are just hard. You don't say, I was taught to stay silent. You just say, that's how I am. But if we trace a lot of those thoughts back far enough, we start discovering something that, quite frankly, is a bit uncomfortable. And that's that some of the beliefs shaping our decisions today were planted in moments when we were too young or too hurt or too inexperienced to challenge them. So again, maybe somebody told you that your dreams were unrealistic. Maybe somebody laughed at you when you shared an idea. Maybe someone minimized your feelings, or maybe someone taught you that your job was to keep the peace, even if it meant that you had to abandon yourself. Maybe you watched adults around you struggle, sacrifice, overwork, stay in unhealthy relationships or marriages, or silence their pain. And now, without even realizing it, you've internalized the message that this must be what life looks like. And listen, this is not about blaming anyone. Most of the beliefs that we inherited didn't come from cruelty, right? They came from people who were doing the best they could with the knowledge they had at that time. But the truth is still the truth. Someone else's fear can become somebody else's limitation. So if you have a parent who struggled financially, it might teach their children to play small. If there's a person who has experienced heartbreak, they may teach someone else not to trust. A family that survived through endurance might unintentionally be teaching that suffering is normal. And again, those beliefs might have made sense in their world, right? But it doesn't automatically make it truth in yours. And so here's where the real work begins. Healing requires the courage to just pause and ask, is this belief actually true? Or is it just something that I've been repeating long enough that it started sounding like the truth? Because I think that sometimes the biggest shift in healing doesn't come from learning something new. It comes from us realizing, wait a minute, I never chose this belief in the first place. I never believed this in the first place. And see, that moment, that is the beginning of freedom. Once you realize that a belief was given to you, you also start to realize that you have the right to question it. And if necessary, you have the right to let it go. And, if we take this a little bit deeper, and start talking about survival beliefs versus truth, right? I think that this is something that a lot of people never realize until they actually start doing the work of healing. And again, it's just that not every belief that you carry was meant to last forever. Some beliefs were created in survival mode. And survival mode is very different than living. See, when people are surviving, they develop these mental shortcuts and emotional rules that help them get through the hard situations. Right? Those rules make sense in the moment because they protect you. They help you navigate through the pain, the danger, uncertainty, the instability, the rejection, all of it. But what protects you in one season can quietly trap you in another. Elevated Awakenings, Aisha, thank you for the heart me and welcome in. So, for example, a child growing up in a chaotic home might learn very quickly, do not speak up, because speaking up causes arguments. Speaking up causes punishment. Speaking up creates tension. Elevated Awakenings, Tania, welcome back. And so silence becomes safety to that child. And in that environment, that makes sense because it protects the child, right? But then that child grows up. And now that they're an adult in a relationship where their voice matters, they're, they're in rooms where their ideas matter, they're in spaces where their boundaries matter. But see, now they're operating off of an old belief to stay quiet. So instead of protection, that belief becomes self-erasure. And that happens in so many areas of our life. Someone grew up watching financial struggle, and now they may develop the belief that money is hard to make. Or people like us don't get wealthy. Someone who experienced betrayal may all of a sudden adopt the belief that you can't trust anyone. Someone who had to grow up too fast might develop the belief that I have to take care of everybody. Someone who constantly had to prove themselves, might develop the belief that my value comes from my productivity. And again, these beliefs weren't random. They were survival strategies. They are the things that we had to do at the time to survive what was happening at that time. But the problem is survival strategies don't always know when the danger has passed. Your nervous system remembers the old environment. Your mind keeps running that old program. So you end up responding, to your present life using the rules that were created for your past life. And that is exhausting. That is absolutely exhausting because you could be in a healthy relationship and still feel guarded. You could be in a safe environment and still feel defensive. You could have opportunities right in front of you and you still hear a voice saying, don't get your hopes up. And listen, that's not a weakness. It's just old survival programming. But see, here's where healing comes in. Healing doesn't mean shaming the beliefs that once protected you. It just simply means honoring the role that they played while recognizing that they are no longer needed. Think about it like armor, right? Armor is very useful when you're in battle. But if you wear armor every single day, even when there's no war happening, you're going to exhaust yourself carrying all that weight. You're going to struggle to move freely. You're going to struggle to rest. And eventually the armor that was meant to protect you becomes the very thing that is restricting you. Some of the beliefs that people are still carrying today were built for battles that ended years ago. Elevated Awakenings, Michelle, welcome in, beautiful. But again, even after those battles have ended, nobody told their mind that the war was over. So part of the healing is to just ask yourself, is this belief protecting me? Or is it preventing me from living the life that I'm trying to create? Because there is a difference between wisdom and fear. Wisdom says, I've learned from my experiences. Fear says, I will never allow myself to experience anything different. Elevated Awakenings, true. Welcome in, bro. What up, though? And so again, if we're being honest, a lot of people have built their lives around avoiding pain rather than pursuing growth. But avoidance isn't healing. Avoidance is just long-term survival mode. And survival mode might keep you safe, but it will never help you feel truly alive. So sometimes healing looks like laying down beliefs that once protected you. Not because they were wrong, but because you've grown beyond the environment that created them. And when that happens, you stop living like you're stuck in attack, right? You start living like someone who deserves peace. Make Make sure y'all staying hydrated today, okay? Okay, so I want to talk about something that a lot of people don't realize is shaping their lives every single day. And this is such a big one. And it's family scripts. Every family has them. You are not exempt. They're the sayings, the attitudes, the expectations, the unwritten rules about how life works. Every family has a script. And the thing about family scripts is that they rarely show up as a formal conversation. Nobody sits you down and says, here are the beliefs you're going to carry for the rest of your life. No, they just show up in casual comments, in repeated phrases, in the way that people react to things, in what gets praised and what gets shut down. You hear things growing up like, people like us don't do that. Or money changes people. You better be grateful for what you have. Drop a green heart if you've heard one of these before. Or don't air your business. You made your bed, now lie in it. Or marriage is hard. Life ain't fair. Stay quiet. Keep your head down. Family is family no matter what. Right? And listen, some of those statements come from love, right? Some came from people trying to prepare you for the reality of the world. Some came from generations who had to navigate systems that were stacked against them. But the truth that we don't say out loud is that just because something was repeated for years doesn't automatically make it wisdom. Exactly true. Sometimes it just means that it has never been questioned. And when something is repeated long enough in a family, it starts to feel like the law. You don't challenge it. You don't analyze it. You just accept it. It is what it is, right? And so those scripts quietly start shaping every decision that you make. Maybe the family script said, security matters more than happiness. So you stay in jobs that drain you, and they drain your soul because that's what responsible people do. Maybe your family script said, you don't leave relationships easily. You stay and you fight. So you stay longer than you should in a relationship because walking away suddenly feels like failure. Maybe your family script said, talking about your feelings is weak. That is a weakness. So you are now bottling everything up and calling it strength. Maybe the family script said, you always help family. So now you keep pouring into people who never pour back into you. Now again, this isn't about blaming our families. Most people are simply passing down what they've been taught. But generational patterns work like this. If nobody stops to examine the script, it just keeps getting handed down like an heirloom, generation after generation, until somebody finally pauses and says, wait, why do we believe this? And let me tell you something, that moment, that's where the generational healing begins. But it's also where things get really uncomfortable. Because when you start questioning the family beliefs, people sometimes take it personally, right? They feel judged. So they might say things like, oh, so now you think you better than us. Y'all done got you a little life coach and now you feel like you better than us. Or you've changed. You forgot where you come from. But questioning a belief doesn't mean that you're rejecting your roots. It just means that you're making sure that the belief that is guiding your life is actually healthy and intentional and aligned with who you are becoming. You can honor your family without repeating the patterns that they lived by. You can respect where you came from and still be, what am I trying to say? You can respect where you came from without staying confined to it. Because, your family gave you a starting point, but they didn't give you the final destination. And so part of becoming an adult is realizing that some of the beliefs that you inherited were never meant to be permanent. They were just supposed to be the start of the conversations. But if nobody ever questions the script, then the story never changes. And sometimes the most courageous thing that you can do is just simply say, this may have been the story before me, but this doesn't have to be the story after me. And, I also want to talk about borrowed beliefs and Black women. Okay? Because I think this part hits a little differently, especially for Black women. There are certain beliefs that have been handed down through generations that people call strength. But if we're being real, some of them are just unquestioned survival patterns. And so when you grow up hearing these things your whole life, they stop sounding like pressure and they start sounding like identity. You hear things like, you got to be strong. You can handle it. You don't need help. You got this. You're the backbone. You're the one that everybody can depend on. And on the surface, that sounds like a compliment. But what often sits just underneath those words are an expectation that you carry more than you share. And it's that you are now, you'll endure more pain because of it. You'll tolerate more disrespect because of it. You'll sacrifice more of yourself because you're strong. And somewhere along the line, the belief system started to convince a lot of women that strength meant never needing support. Strength means pushing through exhaustion. Strength means holding everything together even when you're falling apart inside. Strength means being the one everyone runs to while nobody stops to ask you how you're doing. But today we're telling the truth, right? A lot of what gets labeled as strength is actually just unhealed endurance. It is survival. It is adaptation. It's the result of generations of women doing what they had to do to keep their families afloat, to raise their children, to survive injustice, to navigate systems that were never built for them, and to hold communities where nobody else would. And I think that history deserves respect. It deserves honor. But honoring resilience doesn't mean that you have to keep repeating the unnecessary suffering. And sometimes what looks like healing is redefining what strength actually means. And understanding that strength might mean saying no without explaining yourself, setting boundaries with the people that you love, choosing rest without guilt, asking for help, or leaving situations that drain your peace, not overextending yourself just to prove your loyalty. And another borrowed belief that I think shows up a lot is the idea that you have to earn love through sacrifice. That if you love people, that means that you have to tolerate everything, right? That loyalty means sticking around no matter how you're treated. That patience means staying quiet. Forgiveness means giving unlimited access. A healthy love doesn't require self-abandonment. And loyalty should never come with the cost of your well-being. Sometimes what people call loyalty is really just conditioning. Conditioning that, taught you to overgive, to overfunction, to fix things that were never your responsibility. Hell, you ain't even break it. To keep the peace at the expense of your own voice. No fear, no doubt. Welcome in, bro. Thank you for the heart me. And when you start healing from those beliefs, yeah, it feels uncomfortable. I mean, we say this every day. Healing is uncomfortable. Because suddenly You're not moving the way that people are used to. You're not available the same way you used to be. You're not tolerating the same things anymore. You're definitely not shrinking yourself to make everybody else comfortable anymore. And people are going to say, oh, she got an attitude. He's selfish. But sometimes the most radical act of self-care and healing is simply deciding that I am no longer going to carry expectations that were placed on me without my consent. And I want to say that again. Let me post that in the chat for y'all, because it is a great affirmation. I am no longer going to carry expectations that were placed on me without my consent. And listen, that doesn't make you cold. It makes you self-aware. It means that you're choosing to build a life where strength includes rest, where love includes boundaries, where support flows in both directions. It is reciprocal. I pour, I get poured into. You know, it's where your worth is not measured by how much suffering you can endure, but to just really know that your worth was established at birth. Right? You don't have to perform to be worthy. You just are. And so again, you know, when we think about real strength is the courage to heal patterns that generations before you never had the space or opportunity to question. And see, that is the kind of healing that is powerful, right? That's the kind of healing that changes your life. And, you know, if we even take this a step farther, let's talk about the part that people don't always connect the dots on. Because borrowed beliefs don't just live quietly in your mind. They shape your life. They show up in your choices. They show up in your relationships. They show up in how you see yourself. And the truth is, when you're living by beliefs that were never actually yours, they can cost you heavier than you realized, right? You might stay in a situation far longer than your spirit can handle. You might keep giving people chances who have already shown you who they are. You might downplay your dreams just because somewhere deep inside of you, a voice is saying, don't get ahead of yourself. You might feel guilty every single time you choose yourself. You might apologize for things that don't require an apology. You might apologize for crying, right? Not realizing, like you said, you're human too. And so you might constantly feel like you have to prove your worth at work, in relationships, even in spaces where you already belong. And all of that usually traces back to some belief that got planted early on. Maybe it was the belief that, you know, don't disappoint people. So you spend your life overextending yourself to meet everybody's expectations. Maybe the belief was that you have to keep the peace. So you swallow your feelings and tolerate things that don't sit right in your spirit. Maybe the belief was that you have to work twice as hard to deserve things that other people get easily. So rest feels uncomfortable to you and slowing down feels like a failure. Maybe the belief was good people don't walk away. So you stay loyal too long to situations that stopped being healthy for you a long time ago. But here's the thing. When you're living by somebody else's belief system, you start making decisions based on fear, right? The fear of breaking the rules instead of the alignment with your truth. And that is exhausting. Because deep down, your spirit knows something ain't right. Your intuition is nudging you. You feel that quiet discomfort before you say yes to something because, you know, you realize you really want to say no to it. So there's this unease, right? Welcome in, Sophie. You feel the heaviness in your chest when you keep shrinking yourself in rooms that were never meant to contain you in the first place. You feel the frustration when you realize that you're living a life that looks acceptable to everyone else, but it doesn't actually feel like you. And, here's the part that can be hard to accept. Some people will absolutely benefit from you staying in that space, from you staying small, from you staying accommodating, from you staying predictable, from you staying quiet. Because when you start questioning borrowed beliefs, it completely changes the dynamic. Isladin, welcome in. Suddenly you're not so easy to control. You're not saying yes to everything. You're setting boundaries. You're prioritizing your peace. And when that shift happens, there are people who are not going to celebrate it. Because the version of you that they were comfortable with was the version that made things convenient for them. But healing is not about convenience. Healing is about truth. And truth sometimes requires you to acknowledge that the life that you've been living might not fully reflect who you really are. It might reflect who you were taught to be, who you were expected to be, who you felt safe being, but not necessarily who you were created to be. And once you start recognizing that, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing where you've been shrinking, where you've been overcompensating, where you've been carrying emotional responsibilities that do not belong to you. And that awareness, just like every other part of healing, can feel uncomfortable because it's forcing you to confront something important. And, if the beliefs that are guiding your life were never yours, then that means you have the right to choose something different. And then that's where the shift begins, right? When you stop asking what other people think and you start asking what actually aligns with my peace, my purpose, and the life that I want to build. And sometimes the hardest part about releasing borrowed beliefs isn't recognizing them. It's realizing how attached people are to them, including us. Because beliefs don't just sit in our minds, they become part of our identity. They shape how we see ourselves, how we see the world. They shape how we interpret what's happening around us. Spanish Empress, welcome in. So, when somebody starts to question a belief that you've lived by your entire life, it can feel less like curiosity and more like a personal attack. I mean, just think about it. If someone spent years believing that hard work means constant exhaustion, and then you introduce the idea that success can include balance and rest, that belief might feel threatening. Because if rest is allowed, then all of that exhaustion suddenly feels unnecessary. And that's a hard thing for people to process. Or take the belief that staying no matter what in a relationship, even if it's toxic, proves loyalty. So if you have someone who has built their identity around enduring, difficult relationships, questioning that belief can feel like they're rewriting their entire understanding of love. Because now they have to confront the possibility that what they called loyalty might actually be self-sacrifice. And that realization can bring up grief, right? Grief for the time spent, for the energy given, grief for the parts of themselves that that they ignored just to keep something going. So instead of examining a belief, many people do something very human. They defend it, right? They double down. They repeat it louder. They dismiss others' perspectives. And it's not because they're stubborn. It's because letting go of a belief would require them to rethink their entire story. And rethinking your story can be scary because if the belief changes, then your choices are probably going to have to change too. But change requires courage. And here's something important to understand. Just because a belief is familiar doesn't mean that it is healthy. And just because a belief helped you to survive then doesn't mean that it should guide the rest of your life. But see, the mind doesn't already know the difference. It doesn't always know the difference. The mind likes certainty. It likes predictability. Even if the belief is limiting, it feels safer than stepping into something new. So people protect their beliefs the same way they protect their comfort zones, right? They say things like, that's just how life is. Don't question it. That's just the way that people are, right? Don't rock the boat. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because, that's just how we were raised. It is what it is. But those statements aren't always truth. Sometimes we have to fix it because it definitely is broken. And sometimes just because it isn't broken still doesn't mean that it is healthy. It doesn't make it right. So again, those statements aren't always truths. Sometimes it's just defenses. Defenses that keep people from examining the deeper questions. Like, what if the belief that I've been living by isn't actually serving me anymore? And let's bring this back to healing, because growth often requires something that most people avoid, which is radical honesty. The willingness to look at a belief and say, this helped me once, but it might not be helping me now. And that's not weakness. That is maturity, right? Because it takes courage to admit when a belief needs to evolve. Coach Shishi, welcome in, sis. Thank you for the heartbeat. It takes humility to acknowledge that something that you once thought was truth might have actually been conditioning. Right, Monique? But when you give yourself permission to question your beliefs, you start to realize that you're not obligated to keep living, by the rules that don't align with who you're becoming. You are allowed to grow beyond them. You are allowed to choose better. You are allowed to say, that belief got me through a season, but it doesn't get to define the rest of my life. You get to return what was never yours. Right? This is where the real work begins. Because recognizing a borrowed belief is one thing, but returning it is something entirely different. And let's be honest, letting go of beliefs that shaped your life is not always easy. Some of those beliefs are tied to the people that you love. They're connected to your upbringing, your culture, your family traditions, your survival stories. So when you start questioning them, it can feel like you're betraying where you came from. But healing isn't about dishonoring your past. It's about deciding what deserves to move forward with you and what doesn't. You can appreciate the lessons that someone tried to give you without accepting every limitation that comes with it. You can respect your family's journey without repeating every pattern that they lived through. You can love people deeply and still recognize that some of the beliefs that they carried were shaped by pain and fear or circumstances that you no longer live in. Sometimes returning a belief just sounds like saying that belief may have helped you survive, but that's not how I'm choosing to live. That is not rebellion, it's evolution. And let's talk about the emotional side of this for a bit. Because when you start returning beliefs, right? When you return it to sender, people notice. They notice when you stop responding the way that you used to. You stop tolerating things that you used to brush off. You stop volunteering yourself for the emotional labors that drain you. Now you start setting boundaries. You start saying no. You start protecting your time and your energy and your peace. And when that happens, some people may not understand the shift. They may say, the things that we're used to hearing, you've changed, you're acting different, you're being weird. You used to be so easygoing, right? But what they're noticing isn't a flaw. It's not an attitude. It's self-awareness. Because when you start releasing those borrowed beliefs, your behavior naturally changes, right? You're no longer operating from guilt. You're no longer operating from obligation. You're no longer operating from fear of disappointing people. You're operating from alignment. And alignment often requires you to say, this doesn't belong to me anymore, right? Maybe the belief was that you had to keep everyone happy. Maybe it was that you have to fix everybody else's problem, or that your worth only comes from how much you can carry. Maybe the belief was that walking away from something unhealthy makes you the bad person. But the truth is, some beliefs were never meant to stay forever. Some were just a part of the environment that you were raised in. And part of healing is learning how to release those things with clarity, not bitterness. You don't have to fight people about it. You don't have to convince anyone. And you absolutely do not have to explain every decision. Sometimes returning a belief is quiet. A lot of times it's internal. It's just a moment where you simply decide that I don't agree with this anymore. And once that shift happens, your life begins to move differently. Your choices start reflecting your values instead of your conditioning. Your relationships start reflecting mutual respect instead of obligation. Your peace becomes something that you can actively protect instead of something that you have to constantly sacrifice. And I think that the beautiful part about returning borrowed beliefs is that you get to create space. You get to create space for healthier perspectives, for new possibilities, space for beliefs that actually support the life that you are trying to build. Returning beliefs to sender allows you to finally make the room to breathe that you deserve. Because you were never meant to carry every story that was handed to you. Some stories were meant to end with you. And that's not rejection. That is healing at its finest. And now that we've talked about identifying your beliefs or your borrowed beliefs and returning the ones that don't belong to you, there's one more step that I think that people overlook. Because you can't just remove beliefs, you have to replace them with something intentional. Because if you don't consciously choose what you believe, then your life will keep filling in the blanks for you. Other people will keep rewriting your rules. The culture will keep telling you how you're supposed to act and who you're supposed to be. And before you know it, the old conditioning will just sneak right back in there. So part of healing is doing the deeper work of asking yourself those real questions, not the surface level questions, but I'm talking about the kind that make you pause for a second. The questions like, what do I actually believe about love? Do you believe love should be peaceful, or do you believe that love is supposed to be a constant struggle? Because if your belief that is that love should always come with pain, then you might keep choosing relationships that prove that belief to be true. Or maybe your question is, what do I believe about rest? Do I believe that rest is necessary and healthy, or do I believe that rest has to be earned through exhaustion? Because if you believe that rest equals laziness, then you're going to keep pushing yourself until burnout feels normal. Or what about this one? What do I believe about my worth? Is your worth connected to your productivity, your achievements, how much you do for other people? Or do you believe that your worth exists simply because you're here? Because that belief alone changes the way that you show up for the world. You stop chasing validation. You stop shrinking in rooms where you belong. You stop proving yourself to people who were never planning to recognize your value in the first place. And then there's the question that I think a lot of people avoid. What do I believe about boundaries? Because see, some people were taught that boundaries are rude, right? That saying no is disrespectful. That protecting your time or energy makes you selfish. But when you start writing your own belief system, you might decide something different. You may decide that boundaries are simply self-respect in action. Coach Melissa, welcome in. Right? Boundaries are not punishment. They're not rejection. They're clarity. And we know that clarity produces peace. Now, here's the truth about rewriting your belief system. It does not happen overnight. You don't just wake up one morning and magically think different about everything. It is a process. Healing is a process. And that process starts when you start noticing your thoughts, right? You start catching old beliefs when they pop up. That voice that says you can't do it. You're asking for too much. You should keep the peace and be quiet. You don't deserve anything better than this. And instead of accepting those thoughts automatically, you pause and you ask yourself, and is this belief actually true? Or is this just something that I've heard so many times that it starts sounding like the truth? Thank you for the heart, me. And that pause alone is powerful because awareness creates choice. And once you become aware of the beliefs that are running your life, you can start intentionally choosing ones that actually support your healing instead of limiting it. Maybe your new belief sounds like love should feel safe. Rest is productive. My voice matters. My boundaries are valid. I am worthy just because I am. I don't need to prove anything. Growth is allowed. Healing is allowed. Peace is allowed. And slowly those new beliefs begin to take root and life begins to shift. Elevated Awakenings, Brooks, welcome in. And it doesn't shift because the world suddenly changed. It's just simply because your lens did. And the lens that you see life through determines everything. So if there's one thing that I want you to take from this conversation, it's this. You are not obligated to keep living by the belief that you never chose. You are allowed to examine them. You are allowed to question them. You are allowed to release them. And most importantly, you are allowed to write a belief system that supports the life that you're becoming. So family, as we close out today's conversation, I just want you to sit with something for a moment. Not rush past it, not brush it off, just sit with it. Because today wasn't really about information, it was more about awareness. And when I say awareness, I'm talking about awareness of the stories that we've been carrying, the expectations that we've been living under, the beliefs that quietly shape our decisions, our relationships, our confidence, our boundaries, sometimes without us even realizing it. And the truth is, a lot of people are walking through life feeling stuck and frustrated or disconnected from themselves. and they can't quite figure out why. But sometimes the reason isn't a lack of discipline. It isn't a lack of intelligence. It's not a lack of opportunity, right? Sometimes the real issue is that you've been trying to build a life using beliefs that were never designed for your freedom. Beliefs that came from somebody else's fears, someone else's wounds, someone else's survival story. And the thing about survival stories, they can be powerful teachers, but they're not meant to be the permanent instructions. So here are the questions that I want you to take with you today. Not to answer for me, not to answer for anyone else, but to answer honestly for yourself. What belief have I been living by that I never consciously chose? What belief have I been living by that I never consciously chose? Where did it come from? Who modeled it? Who repeated it? Who benefited from it? And the most important question of all is, do I still agree with it? Because healing sometimes begins the moment that you realize something as simple as knowing that you don't have to carry everyone's story, right? You don't have to carry every story that you inherited. You don't have to live by every rule you were taught. You don't have to stay loyal to beliefs that keep you small, silent, exhausted, or disconnected from your truth. Some beliefs were meant to end with you. And when you decide to question them, release them, and replace them with something healthier, something aligned, something peaceful, that is where real freedom begins. Not perfect freedom, not overnight transformation, but the kind of freedom where your life starts reflecting who you truly are instead of who you were taught to be. So today's affirmation is simple. I hope that you allow it to sit with you for a second. I release every belief that was handed to me but never meant for me. I choose truth that supports my healing, my growth, and my peace. Glow Love, welcome in. Thank you for sharing the live. I release every belief that was handed to me but never meant for me. I choose truth that supports my healing, my growth, and my peace. One more time. I release every belief that was handed to me but never meant for me. I choose truth that supports my healing, my growth, and my peace. Now listen, family, if this conversation hit home for you today, go ahead and drop some green hearts in the chat. That's our way of saying I'm healing, I am growing, and today I am showing up for me. And if you know someone who might need this reminder, go ahead and share this episode with someone. Sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do is pass along the conversations that help someone else see their life a little more clearly. And remember, if you are looking for more resources, encouragement, and a community, while you're on your healing journey, I encourage you to check out our website at selfcareclub.org. That is our digital home where you will find tools, motivational merch, and, just reminders that support your growth every step of the way. I invite you all to join our Room to Breathe project community powered by School. You can also access that from our website or by visiting the link located in my bio or on the profile. And family, just remember, healing doesn't mean that you have to erase your past. Hey, Avita. Healing simply means that you decide what parts no longer get to control your future. Now, before we go, let me leave you all with a little love and light. As always, I'm here to encourage you to keep breathing. Thank you. Through the highs, the lows, and every moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even if it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self Care Club, you will always be seen, always valued, and always be supported. So don't be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life, and I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. Remember, tomorrow we will be exclusive on YouTube. So if you have yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, I encourage you to go over there, search Room to Breathe Project, the same as our name on the platform that you're watching, and subscribe. So that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. Tomorrow we are sitting down with the awesome Valeria Ribeiro. She is, oh my gosh, she is just out here sailing the seas with her dog, y'all. It is such a good conversation. So I hope you guys join us tomorrow to get a taste of, her life out there sailing. The topic tomorrow is I'm Possible, a Black woman, uncharted waters, and the courage to dream. And it really ties into the conversation that we had today about changing your beliefs and letting go of what is not yours. And it took her making a decision to dream beyond the limitations, to see something bigger than what was handed to her. So again, join me tomorrow on YouTube, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we sit down with Valeria and talk about just life, right? Just life as it is, and what it looks like for her to put herself first, right? And to dare to dream. One of the things that I really admire about Valeria is that, she grew up in what we would call poverty, in one of the slums in South America. And, she honestly once believed that her future had already been written. As a child, she, thought that she could either do this or she could do that. There was nothing else, and at some point in life, she decided to challenge that belief and dream bigger. And so join us tomorrow so you guys can hear her survival story and really her thriving story, because I don't know, like I said, she is just out here being so amazing. Like, I look at her and I'm like, that is Black girl magic in motion. Okay. So join us tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube for another Room to Breathe featured Friday. I do look forward to connecting with all of you. I will see you guys tomorrow, 9 a.m. For everybody else, we'll be back on Monday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on TikTok. Podcast starts at 9. All right. Thank you guys so much. And I hope you guys have an amazing day.